because, which is down there at 18th and Dolores, that was a kernel of an idea to have a gay congregation, Jewish congregation. And Harvey knew about that. And so, it wasn't like he was religious. I mean, he knew the Bible, shocked everybody. I mean, he just beat the pants off of, the person he debated with on the Greeks thing. I mean, he really knew religion. And he would have really good morals. And so, I mean, I got the question, and it's just like, he didn't really go scouting at all. I mean, he stuck with with all kinds of people. It was kind of a general thing about, people in equity. But, he had a religious history, and he applied it to everybody, He's a real humanist.
Michael, we couldn't agree with you more, actually, and we couldn't agree with you more about your point. And I think Harvey himself, right, who kept insisting that you must know your history, would have wanted that history to be more than simply Harvey Milk history. So I completely agree with you. The Queers of Compton's Cafeteria might also be added to that list that you've already said, right? So yeah. And the GLBT Historical Society and the Hormel Center and the San Francisco Public Library are filled with the lives of these other GLBTQ people that we need to convey to each other and share stories about. And I hope that when the FAIR Act is finally implemented and implemented well, but we hope, that the history is more than simply a paragraph in textbooks in California schools, only about Harvey. Of course, that would be important, but those other stories have to be told as well.
I heard you at the Castro, Danny.
Yeah.
And I think that you said that Harvey was also a photographer.
Yes, he was.
And so I'm just kind of curious who he was as a photographer. What did he like to photograph? And also, where can his photographs be seen, if anywhere? And same with, my question is for you, where can your photographs be seen?
Okay. Harvey was...
Can you repeat the question for the back?
Oh, okay. So the question was to talk about Harvey as a photographer and also my own photographic body of work. I think one of the things that I get sort of inaccurately is that I was part of Harvey's political think tank. I was so not. Harvey and I had great talks about creativity and art, which is not to say that's not political, but I wasn't necessarily an on-the-ground activist per se, and unfortunately, over time, people kind of come to expect that of you, but it really isn't who I was or who I even am today. But the power of art making is not lost on me. So, and that was some of the conversation that we had, because of course he was a great lover of theater, and he brought that into his own brand of political activism, and I was paying attention to all that. So his own personal photography reflects all of those types of nuances. You see some beautiful shots of his years on Broadway with his great dear friend and ally Tom O'Horgan, the Broadway director, and you see an incredible series of portraits of his romantic partners and his casual friends and his great love of male bonding. It's very much a subtext of what he's about. I feel that was sort of a stimulus for his political journey, was that he had such a great sense of indignation about not being able to love men in the world, that it motivated what he did politically. And there's all the typical stuff that you would imagine. Trips to fantastic places, and he loved photography. I actually own his camera, and it's his first Nikon that he bought in the overseas, and it has his name monogrammed on the bottom of it. So. And my own work you can find here and there. The Hormel collection has a portfolio of 35 of my images, And I say this quite reticently because they told me not to get my hopes up, but I actually have a nibble for a book project. So.
Wow.
And of course, it's his photo on the cover of the book.
Oh yeah, that too.
One thing I'd like to add to Danny's comments. One of the very first photographs that he took was one of me and Harvey. I'm on one side of the desk writing, and Harvey is on the other side of the desk reading. It's the only photograph of Harvey and me together that exists. And I owe it all to my good friend who found it on a fluke.
It was actually originally rejected because it was slightly out of focus, and of course nowadays you can do things in post-production that sort of help things along, and I gave it a try, and it's really a lovely shot because they're both profile, and they're sitting at the countertop where literally Harvey would drop his manuscripts and say, "Frank, please do what you can with this." So why don't you guys take a couple of minutes?
I was wondering, I read a review on the book, and you mentioned Harvey incorporating gay nationalism while appealing to other people. I wonder if you'd explain the gay nationalism part.
Sure. I think that there are a number of dimensions of it. Two that really stick out a lot. One is the economic angle. And so one of the great things, someone in the back had mentioned his knowledge of the Bible and knowledge of Old Testament especially, but New Testament texts as well. He was really a student of history, and this is what the archive bears out, a student of history, and knew black liberation pretty well, and tended to use a lot of mainstream civil rights, but also black power discourse, almost as an inventional resource, as an index with which to move forward. And part of that was black nationalism, and I think he borrowed that notion of by blank, right? You know, by black, by gay, and that was one of his first moves. Actually, in '73, was to form some of these guilds. In '74, to form guilds to buy gay, literally to make sure that money stays within one's community and then generates power from that economic sort of modality. And so that was one of them. That's one part of nationalism. The other part was the political franchise itself, which bears itself out in '73 and the four campaigns itself, and his insistence that, listen, we need to work together as a coalition, in coalitions, and this was his populist sort of persona coming out, but at the same time that he mentioned that, a city is the people, everyone has their own individual voice, and they contribute to what he called the quality of life of the city. He said, still, we need a validly open gay leaders to step forward. So at the same time that we work in coalitions for our community, for our internal politic, right, we need someone to step in. And of course he was that, step up and step in, and he was that person. So the nationalism, and there might be more dimensions that Chuck or others could talk about, but one was the economic. It was the notion of buying gay, right? And the other was the political franchise itself, and that starts to build the grassroots of power within a community internally.
I just want to say thank you to everybody who's here, to Books Inc. and the GLBT Center, and to you guys who helped create the book, because I just got off work and it's Harvey Milk Day. I was like, you know what, I'm going to watch Milk. That was the only thing I had to do today, was watch Milk, and I ended up going on this huge voyage that was just very overwhelming in a very good way. And the main thing I came 3 years ago, to San Francisco to find this community, and Jesus Christ, I found it. Like, so thank you guys for all of that.
Yeah, I have a question. It's more about what is the problem with queer academia, that in fact they don't do history, they do theory. I think we've lost almost 2 or 3 generations of people to this thing of queer theory. I'm an independent amateur historian. I've curated exhibits on Harry Hay. I run a website on Edward Carpenter. And it amazes me how much stuff is out there, that it's that whole thing of the ecstasy in the research library, reading room, where suddenly you get that piece of paper and it's like, holy fucking shit, this proves that Walt Whitman did sleep with Edward Harvey, or something like that. And I mean, to me, it's incredibly exciting, but it does seem like we've lost these generations of people who should be doing this kind of hands-on, deep research type of work, and they're writing theory, which for the most part is unreadable and is only read by a small. I mean, even here in this room, you know, I try reading this stuff. I kind of get it, but to me, that is not history. So I'm just wondering, what is the culpability of queer academia in this kind of lack of gay history happening?
Yes. Well, there is a lot of very good GLBTQ history happening in the academy. It's also true that there is a lot of investment and momentum in queer theory. And it's also true that as someone who is deeply invested in GLBT history, you know, it is also my community to have to read and deal with queer theorists. So it is often the case that you will read an assertion about GLBT history by a queer theorist. And if you've read enough of GLBT history, you'll say, well, that's simply not true. And you know that it also won't matter because of the communities in which queer theory is operating. Ideally, I will say this, that ideally it would be the case that queer theory would be deeply informed by GLBTQ history, and I think some excellent queer theory is. I think we might all agree that it could be, to a greater degree, informed by GLBTQ history. That's certainly our hope, right? And so that's the investment in this project and everything else we do, right? So, but thanks for the comment again. Absolutely.
Well, I would like to thank you for saving Harvey's legacy from Give Him Hope. I mean, it's the same as happened to Martin King. You know, he only said one thing, he only had one speech, and an entire range of political activity is therefore blocked out.
Right.
So I've read a bunch of the stuff in the book, and, you know, Harvey really did deal with lots of topics, and anything that was up, he dealt with it. And I thought maybe I would just share a couple of memories the first time I met him and the last thing I worked on with him. First time I met him, I think it was his first campaign, because he still had the ponytail. Is that right? Well, that was before, right?
Yeah.
And I met him at the baths. But
What?
it was outside the baths. It was a bisexual bathhouse where Sutro baths. No. On where 1050 is now.
Waterfall. Sutro baths.
It was Sutro baths, but it was down on. And he was telling people he's running for office, and he was collecting donations in a milk carton that he had cut out. So he'd cut half of the front out, so it just said Homo Milk. I loved it. But it's pretty clear why he didn't win. The last thing that I got to work with him on, because a lot of my friends thought he was too liberal, in other words, to work within the establishment, you know. And I said, yeah, but look what he's doing. It's great, you know. And one thing we were working on his last year was an attempt to stop real estate speculation. It was a huge issue even then. And at that point, gay people were being moved into black neighborhoods or other poor neighborhoods, fixing up the buildings and then flipping them. And he and I came up with an idea of how to stop it, which was to put a tax on, depends how long you owned a building, how much tax you paid. If you owned the building 10 years or more, it was a no tax or a 1% tax. If you owned it 5 years or more, it was a 50% tax. If you owned it 2 years or less, it was 100% tax. So and he was seriously going to propose this. it fell to me to call Dan White to see if we could get his vote, because I knew his sister.
Mm.
And it was a phone conversation I'll never forget, just because there was this black silence on the other end that was terrifying. So this was getting close to the end there. At any rate, we had to drop it because Prop 13 got passed and no new taxes. But, you know, a lot of people wouldn't be getting evicted now if the last thing Harvey did was save the housing stock in San Francisco by, at that point, keeping it from being constantly turned over and $30,000 houses becoming 70, becoming 150, becoming $500,000 houses, and becoming $2 million houses. I'll shut up.
The gentleman in the hat has been waiting.
Yeah, I wanted to, maybe this will be the final question. I want to ask about the unserious side of Harvey, because I didn't know it. And there are three things that stick in my mind. One, I am the proud owner of a picture from Danny Nicoletta that's a colorized picture of Harvey in a clown suit.
And a what?
Clown suit. So I want to ask about the clown suit, because I never had a chance to ask. Number two, I want to ask about the blue and red plastic glasses, and I want to ask about the barber chair. Like, who sat in it? What was its function? Blah, blah, blah.
Oh, you mean the plastic glasses that are at the GLBT museum? Yeah.
And the barber chair.
Yeah. Well, the barber chair was that came into the store before my time, and they had people giving them stuff all the time because they decorated that thing very sparsely and as they could. They definitely were operating on a shoestring, and I believe somebody said, "Oh yeah, why don't you take this?" and then it became the chair that you sat in when you dropped off your film. Okay, the funny part about that is that, you know, if you were sitting at the counter, you know, you were right at crotch level, so that was a nice treat. You were right at crotch level. Anyway, the glasses were, again, something somebody gave him after he became supervisor, so it was sort of a comical gift, and he would put them on, and he would put on that hat that you would turn on, and then the little red light would turn, and he'd say, as though he was addressing Dianne Feinstein, "Madam President, Madam President, could I get your attention on the floor?" And of course, the clown is my very special portrait of Harvey that nobody else took, and the way that happened was, Harvey was invited to be a celebrity clown for a day along with 600 other San Francisco celebrities, and this was for an advanced publicity piece for the Ringling Brothers Circus, who were coming to town 6 months later, but it was going to be an editorial, and it was people like Bill Graham and Pat Montanon, the society columnists, all got dressed up like clowns, and Harvey was one of them, and he took me along for the ride, and he loved being a clown so much that he convinced the deans of the clown college who were hired to do the makeup to let him borrow the costume, and then he and I drove in his car out to Fort Funston, where he had to go to an Operation Concern benefit, and that's a precursor to our mental health clinics here in San Francisco today, and they were the Operation Concern was the mental health paradigm of the day. And we went out there, and we went to the benefit, and he kind of hit the dance floor as a little clown. And then we went out to the shoreline to cruise the hang gliders, and that's how that beautiful shot happened. And he was posing for me, and you know, there's Harvey as a clown with the shoreline behind him. So that's the story behind that. Peter?
I was just going to say this is going to be the last question, and then because we want to leave time for our guests to sign books. Books will be for sale. Please buy one and support this kind of work. And last question.
Yeah, my question is: you mentioned that Harvey had a very rich legacy, and part of that was the Black liberation and Black power. Did I hear that correctly? Yes. Okay, so one thing, and then I was thinking about what Frank said in conversation with Danny. how to keep that legacy alive and not let it wither away. When I look at the audience, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of black brothers and sisters here today. And I'm wondering, what can we do to kind of not lose that part of our community when it comes to his legacy? Is it outreach or whatever it takes to do that?
Well, I know I'm not telling anyone in this room anything when I note that there have been infrastructural challenges to the dissemination of GLBTQ pasts of all kinds, right? It's not taught in the schools as it should be. It's not taught in so many of the churches and other social spaces. So, I mean, I think that infrastructural problem is being addressed and getting better. And so something like the FAIR Act, we would hope, right? The promise of the FAIR Act would be one effort to remedy those infrastructural challenges and deficits. But I think it's going to take community efforts, right? And so one of the things we've been talking about during our visit here is that it's not only archival history, but it's oral history, so richly exemplified by the comments this evening. So it's finding ways to create intergenerational connections between those who have been around a while and those who are here and having just seen milk, and to make it collaborative. So not to suggest that we're giving you history lessons that you must know, but hey, why don't you collaborate with us to try to create memories of the past, right, and to transmit that history. And then I think you'd find, right, with that effort, diversity of buy-in from all sorts of people in the GLBTQ communities. I mean, that would be the hope, right? But that's a communal effort. That's not simply an institutional effort or a scholarly effort. Right?
Thank you. That's a great place to end.
So yeah, that was a great question. Thank you, and thank you to our panelists who have been wonderful.